Aren't you happy to be alive? Says he with a little froggy in his throat this morning. Good morning to you, Grenada, and a very warm welcome to the first edition of Gudday Grenada for this week. I'm George Grant, and today happens to be the 25th day of November 2019. Pilgrims, pilgrims, pilgrims. Just let me start by saying that I hope you guys had a great weekend. I know I certainly did. Managed to get a lot of yeah. But it's back to work, whether at the office or whether you're going to be on the road, wherever you are today. Certainly hope you have a great day and a great rest of the week. And hey, best of all, a great life. That's my wish for you. This morning, we are going to begin. I see there that Ernesto is first up this morning. And by the way, we have to bear in mind that you guys are an hour behind us these days. Oswald Lewis is also chiming in there this morning. So yeah, let's take a look at the rundown. We're going to begin with a look at a statement issued by the opposition leader of the United Workers' Party, Dominica, Lennox Linton. He met with the president of Dominica this past weekend and issued a statement shortly thereafter. So we're going to share that with you. Something I did, my gosh, I don't think it's quite 2 weeks, but at least a week ago. You know, I had heard that they were doing a cleanup job on York House here in St. George. And I thought, you know, let me go take a look and see what this cleanup is like or has resulted in. So I took my little pocket with me, went down there, shot some footage. Last night I finally got around to putting that together, and I'm going to share that with you this morning. And while I was out on the road doing that, that was a time when there was all this talk about Jamrock being abolished. You know, Jamrock is that little section of the market. Quite a story behind that. Well, they have demolished that. So we're going to show you just a few seconds of what the new Jamrock area looks like right now. We do have the national report for you this morning. Yes, and then, remember, these folks made you a promise last week. Looks like they're going to live up to it. The Bain sisters. But they're going to be joined by another economist by the name of Juliet Melville. And they are going to get into a discussion this morning about the 2020 budget presentation, which was made last week. Okay? We are going to, I promise them, we are going to give them, instead of the 20 minutes that we normally give them, 20 minutes to half an hour, they're going to have a full hour this morning. So I'm telling you right now, this program's going until 10:30 this morning. True confession. All right? There you have it. Back here to social media for just a wee bit. Oswald Darbo. Hello, Mr. Darbo. Mr. Darbo. Thanks for pointing out where Jamrock was to me. Oh, Pele. Listen to this story. I'm going to share in a few minutes. Kipling Francis is saying hi to you folks. Lincoln Roberts is saying hello from chilly Wellington, Florida. Hey, the cold's moving south, eh? But he's sending much love to everybody. Claude Pudner is saying hello to you guys as well this morning. Nice to see you folks there. Well, folks, let's get down to brass tacks. Lennox Linton, the political leader of Dominica's United Workers' Party, has met with Dominica's president, Charles Savrin. In an effort, and remember that name, Charles Savrin, it's going to come up again later on in the program, in a different capacity, in an effort to quell the tensions surrounding the elections which are scheduled for the 6th of December. Following that meeting, he told the media that he was not sure that anything was achieved. but his party remains firm on the demands that it is making. Check this out.
We have just completed a meeting with the President of the Commonwealth of Dominica, His Excellency Charles Savarin. Mr. Savarin invited the United Workers' Party to meet with him to talk about the situation in Dominica as we head into an election, and to talk about issues of peace and tranquility in the build-up to the election and in the aftermath of the poll. We met with Mr. Savarin. We discussed with him the issues and the matters that he drew attention to. We took the opportunity, of course, to take Mr. Savarin back to 1979 when he was a fighter for freedom, someone who championed the rights of the people of Dominica as a trade union leader. And we reminded him of the importance of people in a democracy being able to stand for rights, being able to protest for rights, being able to stand where they feel they're being oppressed, being able to stand where they feel they need government to be acting differently in the public interest of Dominica, as they are right now in this whole question of electoral reform and the refusal of the government over many years to facilitate the work of the Independent Electoral Commission to have the list of electors cleaned and to have ID cards for voting in Dominica. We have urged the President to ensure that all parties involved, especially the ruling Dominica Labour Party, focuses in this period on obedience to the rule of existing law and adherence to the constitutional provisions insofar as the electoral concerns that we have apply. We have a situation, and we reported this to the President this morning, where we have raised objections to over 1,300 names on the list, 1,300 people who have been trying to get on the register, and we have raised objections to those. The Electoral Commission, the Chief Elections Officer, is indicating that there is no time available to them to deal with these objections, yet they're going ahead to issue a final list, which as far as we're concerned is totally and absolutely unacceptable, and speaks to the injustice that the people of Dominica have been talking about, the rights that they have been denied, that they're protesting for, and we will not relent. We are going to insist that the arrangements are made for these objections to be dealt with before the final list is published. Is the only way we can at least have some semblance going in of a free and fair election, notwithstanding all the things that are going on with overseas voting and all the bribery, all the treating and so on, that Mr. Skerritt and company have engaged to steal yet another election in Dominica. I'm not sure that we achieved anything in the meeting. The President has asked us whether the United Workers' Party would be willing to sit down with members of the Labour Party in a discussion about these very issues that we have raised and how we can go forward. We have agreed with him in principle that we would attend such a meeting on the understanding that it is going to be focused on obedience to the law and adherence to the constitutional provisions as it relates to the concerns that the Dominican people have with their electoral register and the necessity for the list to be cleaned and for there to be ID cards for voting as minimum requirements going into the election.
Okay, there you have it. Kind of disappointing to see that he feels that nothing was achieved. Please keep your fingers crossed and keep praying for the people of Dominica. They need every word of prayer they can get. Now, that's that. Let me now play for you that video of York House, which I shot this past week. I see that Anthea Aurello is joining us, Yvonne Joseph, Margaret, hi Mags, Lindonna Charles, and Rodney Wade. Nice to see you guys. So here comes that piece, York House. You know, folks, I shot that last week and actually put it together about midnight last night. And based on the comments I see here, some of you have been touched. That thing really, really moved me. I think that's the reason why it took so long to put this thing together. It is just heart-wrenching. That was one of the most outstanding landmarks in this country and probably around the Caribbean. Look at York House today. And listen, that was after it was cleaned up. I'll tell you something too. When you watch that video, you probably saw a couple of shelves with books, okay? And I became curious. I mean, Ivan was in what, 2004? So that's 15 years ago? And the books are still there? Wouldn't you think that they would have tried to retrieve everything within a year or so, within months, within weeks after what happened there? That was, House of Parliament. So I decided, let me go take a look at one of those books. I don't know how to describe it because I haven't talked with an attorney, but it seems that those were notebooks that were used to record various testimonies, dates, and the comments he made or she made or whomever. Shouldn't those records have been removed from that site? George, don't let your blood pressure go up on this. It's only Monday morning. Now, let me get back here. Oswald Darbo says, would the restoration of York House be considered nation building? Good question. Lydia James says, George, my heart just broke into pieces looking at York House. Very sad. I know how you feel. Margaret is also responding to Oswald by saying the same thing I just said. Good question. And she agrees with Lydia. You have many fond memories of that building. Yes, sirree, we all do. Oswald Darbo says, misleading. Yeah, that was misleading. And Oswald, I'm going to play the video in just a minute and you'll see what I'm talking about. Ryan says, good day, Gigi in Grenada from Florida. And he says that was a very disturbing video. Yes. Antheorolo says, so painful watching the state of this building. I'm grateful for the memory I have of it when it was alive. Sad, really sad. Kipling Francis says, George, you would be called a destabilizer, but the truth will protect you. That is a shame. Arthur Langine says, thank you, Brother George, for that video. With the NNP in power, I'm not surprised of the condition of York House. Yeah, folks. Now, what about Jamrock? Pele, I wasn't exactly sure what part of the market was Jamrock. I'd heard about Jamrock for years, but wasn't exactly sure what part. Well, let me tell you. I called Pele, Oswald. He explained to me, okay? And he also said to me, you know, that's one of the places where they sell drugs. Sell drugs. Okay. So I went down, took a look. When I got there, it was raining a little bit, but here's what I found. There we go. That's looking at the building across the street from the market. And if we pan in here, you see exactly where Jamrock was situated. So you can tell that a lot of stuff has been removed from there. Huh? So, there you go. Now, I don't know how many of you saw the report that the GIS did on that story, but in their story, they simply mentioned that the Jamrock area of the market is being demolished because of activities that are taking place there. Activities. So I think everybody knows what's been going on there. Everybody knows what's been going on there. But the GIS was afraid, I guess, to say, drugs, okay? So, while I was there, the rain came down very heavily, and when I was finished shooting, I couldn't leave because I didn't have an umbrella, okay? So I stood around there waiting on the rain to cease. And there were a few people, I think about 3 people or so, talking up, right there. And it dawned on me, didn't the GIS say activities? Couldn't they just say, illegal activities? Illegal? Let me tell you something, folks. By the time that rain ended, and I was ready to leave Jamrock, I was whoopie doopie 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 doopie. Woo. Enough said. Moving on here, Roger Mitchell said that piece we did a little while ago. It's hard to watch. Donna Joseph says, good morning from the cold north. And Margaret says, the state of the market is also another damn shame. Absolutely, Margaret. Who are these people fooling? You get the impression that they're trying to clean up the drug problem. I mean, go on down there and you get a whiff of this thing, man. Anyway, now, folks, keep your eyes open because today there's going to be a television program aired by that international network, Al Jazeera. Okay? A little while ago, somebody posted something here which was inaccurate, and that kind of bugs me. It really bugs me when people misinterpret what is being said. I want you to watch this video. It's a promo put out by Al Jazeera about the piece that they're going to show today. And you'll see why I got a little bit irate. You're going to report stuff, especially on this program, report the facts. Here we go.
Al Jazeera's investigative unit has discovered the secret sale of diplomatic passports has helped keep some Caribbean politicians in power. Dominica's general election takes place on December the 6th, and as Deborah Davis reports, the result may be influenced by payments from wealthy foreigners who want the privilege of becoming an ambassador.
This is Oliver Serafin, a former Prime Minister of Dominica. Using concealed cameras, we film him willing to broker a deal for a rich businessman living in Asia.
Okay, but obviously, we're talking in the region for about 400,000.
He says the businessman would then be made an ambassador for Dominica, despite having no connection to the country. Serafin says the money will go to Dominica's current Prime Minister, Roosevelt Skerrit, to help win a 4th term in power.
But he has a master plan to bring Dominicans who are in the Oak Islands, like in Antigua, St. Thomas, and so on. Fly them in to vote.
Last week, police fired tear gas and rubber bullets at a crowd demanding an end to what they say is widespread vote rigging. Our investigation reveals how an Iranian, Ali Reza Monfred, bought his Dominican ambassadorship. He helped fund Prime Minister Skerrit's election win 5 years ago, paying for rallies, T-shirts, and printing the party's manifesto. Monfred's former business partner witnessed the deals.
We don't use the word bribe. We'll just use the word a token of appreciation. But definitely, without that money, Ali would not have got his diplomatic passport.
Monfred hoped the passport gave him diplomatic immunity. It didn't work. He's just been sentenced in Iran to 20 years for embezzlement. Our investigation has found that 6 Caribbean states have appointed dozens of foreigners to be their ambassadors around the world. While many are respected business leaders, several have been exposed as criminals. American Eric Resteiner became an ambassador for Grenada. He's alleged to have filmed Grenada's Prime Minister Keith Mitchell accepting cash in a briefcase. Resteiner said it was $500,000. Keith Mitchell denied any wrongdoing and said he was only paid $15,000 for travel expenses. The video has not been made public. The Americans kept it when they jailed Resteiner for fraud. Oliver Serafin demanded a fee for arranging a Dominica ambassadorship.
How much? How much? $50,000?
Both Serafin and Prime Minister Skerritt later denied any discussion about a diplomatic passport. Skerritt denied any wrongdoing and said any payments were legal campaign contributions. Deborah Davis, Al Jazeera.
And the documentary Diplomats for Sale airs in full at 20 GMT on Monday right here on Al Jazeera.
Okay, so that program should be aired at about noon today. There's still some debate. I think it's going to be 4 o'clock, but there's some who say it's going to be aired at noon today. And I'm glad you had a chance to watch that. Oswald Darbo says here, on the Al Jazeera News Now newscast that said alleged money in briefcase and our Prime Minister's denial of receiving such. Listen again. Thank you very much, Oswald. It irritates me when people just stake stuff and twist it any way they want to use it to be offensive. I resent that. Don't try that here, and I don't care who you are. Okay? Folks, let me get right into the national report right now. In the interest of time, I don't want to keep these ladies waiting. So let's go right to the national report, and then we'll join our team, the Bain sisters, and they're joined by Dr. Juliet Melville. Everybody's out there smiling this morning. Here comes the national.
Despite a planned increase in water rates, Grenada is still expected to be among the lowest when compared with its Caribbean neighbors. We'll have details to this story and more in the national report. Welcome back with the details to the news for Friday, November 22nd. I am Rakisha St. Louis. Low domestic users of the National Water and Sewage Authority will soon pay a rate increase of $2.81 as the company seeks to raise revenue for various projects across the island. That announcement in Parliament on Friday by Leader of Government Business, Honorable Gregory Bowen. He says this has become necessary as the company invests in projects which also provide significant employment for Grenadians. And for these to be sustained, there must be an increase in the company's revenue. The proposal was drawn up following discussions with consultants who were invited to Grenada for discussion on the matter, as NOWASA embarks on significant development.
For the low domestic users who paid before $16.47, they'll now be asked to pay $19.28, an increase of $2.81, Mr. Speaker. And for the others, Mr. Speaker, the increase will be $5 for those in the 30 bracket, $30 per month. Now you increase by 5, and those in the 60 bracket, you increase by 10. I'm talking about domestic users. If you talk about commercial users, those who pay $11,000 will now be paying $13,000, thereabout, Mr. Speaker.
Minister Bowen made a comparison with the rates of other countries, which sought to show that Grenada's is still one of the lowest despite the increase.
Let us look at NOWASA, Mr. Speaker, and let us look at the rates compared to the other countries in the region. Per 1,000 gallons, for 1,000 gallons, Antigua and Barbuda, they will have to pay $21. In the Bahamas, they pay $97. In Barbados, they pay $15. In the BVI, they pay $50. In the Cayman Islands, they pay $45. In Dominica, they pay $21 for the 1,000 gallons. In Grenada, they pay $8.10. St. Vincent, you must give, they pay $6.50. But why? St. Vincent has a different structure. St. Vincent water is tied with the environment. So whereas the government take taxes to favor the environment level, it's one body. So the environmental levy must pay for all the water. So the consumers pay through the environmental, and you say, well, if you pay through environmental, then I would not let you pay that. So this is really an anomaly. St. Lucia is 1221, Mr. Speaker, per 1,000 gallons. And we are moving, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, we're asking the public to look at Nawasa. And by average, the electricity bill is between 5 to 8 times the water bill in the small home. We're not talking about the big homes. In the same people who paid the $16, the electricity bill multiplied that by 5. $80 minimum, Mr. Speaker. So we're asking the people to look at your own institution and realize that they're embarking upon significant development. And remember too, we tell them no, when we go for the rate increase, they're in fact doing the roads when they have to cut it up, they're repaving it. But no, we say you must work with us and to repave it not more than 2 or 3 days after, Mr. Speaker. So we're working with them on that, and they have agreed to do so, Mr. Speaker.
Finance Minister Dr. The Right Honorable Keith Mitchell boasts of significant reduction in debt repayment from 2013 to 2019. During his contribution to the 2020 budget on Friday, Dr. Mitchell said the reduction of the debt repayment by $101 million is significant for government. In 2013, the public debt as a ratio of GDP was 108%. To date, the debt to GDP ratio is on a path of decline, moving from 62.7% at the end of 2018 to an estimated 55.8% at the end of this year. The finance minister said when his administration assumed office in 2013, there was hardly any money to meet debt commitments, putting the country in a position of near bankruptcy.
In other words, 2013, we hardly had any money. So we couldn't even buy medication. Everybody knows we could not pay our bills regionally and internationally. Yet we still had $460-something million to pay in debt. And we could not as a country not pay our debts. But we will be declared as bankrupt, and no country wants to be declared as bankrupt. Today, while we're doing far better, we are now having to pay $101 million less. So that money is going towards education, healthcare, Carroll Company, Martinique Affairs, agriculture. So many areas of services are benefiting from this enormous.
The reduction in the repayment obligation reduces the burden on future generations and creates the space needed to advance developmental programs that would keep Grenada on the path of growth and development.
If we did not manage ourselves properly, we would not be getting the level of projects here, climate change, the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Works. These would not come about if we did not manage ourselves right. And when I looked at the fact, and the numbers came forward this couple of months ago, when the staff provided me the data, and said that in 2013 what the debt payment was, and what it is today, it's $101 million difference.
On Wednesday, during his presentation of the 2020 budget, Dr. Mitchell challenged Grenadians to stay on the course of fiscal prudence. He said, and I quote, "Grenada is deriving too many benefits from being fiscally prudent to alter that course. I encourage Grenadians to pay close attention to the numerous benefits Grenada stands to lose if we forego fiscal prudence," unquote. Prime Minister Mitchell also reiterated his commitment to improve the payment of salaries to government ministers and the hard-working public officers who are unduly compensated for their service to the country. This is the National Report. More news after the break.
Did you join the public service on or after February 22nd, 1985 and have since retired? This might be important to you. Government understands that the NIS pension may be insufficient to take care of your needs. So, while it awaits the court's ruling on the matter of pension for public officers, government has taken action to protect your quality of life so that you can take care of your needs in the meantime. Persons who joined the public service on or after February 22nd, 1985 and serve continuously in an established position for a minimum 26 years and 8 months, and retired at age 60, may be eligible to receive an advance payment, which when combined with NIS, represents 70% of their last salary. For more information, call or visit the Pension Secretariat in the Department of Public Administration, Ministerial Complex, 440-3767.
Welcome back. Cabinet has approved a $2,000 monthly increase in subventions for dialysis patients from $1,000 to $3,000. That announcement by Health Minister Honorable Nicholas Steele. During his contribution to the 2020 budget on Thursday, Minister Steele also announced that his ministry is moving to establish a fully functional, competent dialysis unit by 2020. He added that portable machines and chairs will be obtained to ensure that patients can be treated whenever possible, and structures will be put in place to ensure that the most vulnerable and needy patients are treated first.
We have also increased. I want to thank my colleagues. Cabinet has approved the subvention that was usually given to dialysis patients in need would have been $1,080 a month. Cabinet didn't just double it, they tripled it to $3,080 a month. But we will be using that specifically to make sure that the most needy are addressed first.
Health Minister Steele said Grenada is striving to be on par with international health standards. He said a fully functional unit must have at least 3 chairs. Grenada is aiming to obtain 7 chairs, which will be distributed to hospitals in Carriacou, Princess Alice, and the General Hospital.
The procurement of 5 additional dialysis chairs, permanent fixtures. Those, once procured or delivered, will be put at the General Hospital in the dialysis wing, and the 2 portable that would be operating immediately. One would be moved to Princess Alice and one would be moved to Carriacou, Princess Royal. Mr. Speaker, the current demand in terms of dialysis treatment is 3 chairs, and thus supplying the current national demand. We will be moving to 7 chairs, not because we expect the demand to increase, but we do need to make sure that location is important, and the individuals in Carriacou need to be able to access dialysis in Carriacou. Individuals who live in the north and northeast of the island need to be able to access dialysis there, and that also there is tremendous potential with respect to tourism, to having a functional dialysis machine on island.
Finally, in the news, plans are in place for the operation of a national production center for furniture making in St. Patrick in January 2020. In 2018, Parliamentary Representative for St. Patrick West, Honorable Anthony Boson, made the announcement that a national center for skills training in the Mount Rich Snell Hall area will contribute to the reduction in the unemployment rate within the constituency. On Friday, during her contribution to the 2020 budget, Minister for Skills Development, Honorable Pamela Moses, said the center will be operational from January. The center will target more than 60 young people who will produce furniture for schools and government ministries, significantly reducing the cost of purchasing these items at exorbitant prices.
To produce environmentally safe wooden furniture for all of our schools and ministries in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. The reason I can say very safely and set a date, Mr. Speaker, is really because yesterday 90% of all the major tools were put in place.
According to Minister Moses, minor work is still being done, with an engineer from Austria scheduled to arrive at the end of November to assist in setting up the heavy-duty equipment. She said the next step is the interview process for a manager and assistants.
This skill, woodworking skill, these people are quite scarce, and most of them have their own production shop. And so it was very difficult. But, Mr. Speaker, I did a little advertising on television, and since then we've had many phone calls and we've had many job applications. And so I'm proud to say that the Skills Development Board responsible for our production center can now do some interviews. And so we are definitely heading for our January target to open this production center, first of its kind in our island, in the area of Snell Hall, Montreach, St. Patrick.
That story just ended the national report for today, Friday, November 22nd. Let's recap the top story. Despite a planned increase in water rates, Grenada is still expected to be among the lowest when compared with its Caribbean neighbors. On behalf of the entire news team here at the Government Information Service, I am Rakisha St. Louis saying thank you for joining us. Until next time.
Alrighty, folks, there you have it. That's going to take care of the national report, which was prepared on Friday evening. And I'm going to take a quick break now. The ladies are standing by, and they're going to be coming at you right after this.
Christmas safety tips. Always unplug Christmas tree lights before leaving home or going to sleep. Check your tree lights and outdoor lights for damage each year before you use them. Discard lights with frayed wires, loose connections, and cracked sockets. Do not overload your wall outlets or extension cords. Remind children never to touch lights or outlets. Select lights appropriately. Never use indoor lights outside or vice versa. Happy holidays from Grenlake.
Why wish upon a star? For a bank is better by far. Whatever you're wishing for this Christmas, will give you low interest and no fuss.
Co-op Bank is making Christmas wishes come true. Fix up your home, treat your loved ones, and get everything on your Christmas list this year with our no-fuss loans. As we count down the 12 days to Christmas, you can win awesome prizes every day. Special terms and conditions apply.
Christmas wishes come true with Co-op Bank and you.
Because your vehicle is a necessity, being roadworthy is critical. Hubbard's Motor Department introduces its new tire and battery sales and service outlet located at Building Supplies Compound in Grand Dams, close to the Sugar Mill Roundabout. Available are a wide range of competitively priced tires, maintenance-free batteries, oils and lubricants. Keeping in mind your busy schedule, this outlet is equipped to provide you with fast and reliable service. Simply drive in and you'll be delighted with your service experience. For more information, contact 440-2087. Hubbard's. Quality service. Affordable prices.
There you go. There they are, the Fiscal Alert Cast. Huh? Good to see you ladies. Good morning. And she's exchanged positions this morning. Laurel is usually off on the left. I see she's on the right this morning. Folks, let me tell you what's going to take place this morning. Over the next hour or so, you're going to hear these ladies discussing the 2020 budget, which was presented by Finance Minister Keith Mitchell just this past week at the Trade Center. Now, I knew that the budget was coming up, and I knew that there would be a lot of room for discussion. Actually, yesterday on the Sundays with George Graham program, we did have a discussion, had a number of people in here discussing the budget, and I took in front, if you will, and I asked these ladies, you know, because they're economists and very well versed in finance. I said, would you guys, you know, talk a little bit about the budget on Monday morning? And I was so excited when, in a heartbeat, they agreed. You take it from there, Laurel.
Thank you, George. Good day, George. Yes, good morning.
Morning,
good
Doctor,
morning.
Julie and Gemma and Janice and Laurel and everybody.
Good morning. Welcome to all the listeners tuned in to today's edition of Fiscal Alert. As George said, We have responded to the request to do an in-depth analysis of the budget proposals as presented by Prime Minister and Minister of Finance on November 20th. Our economists, Laurel and Juliet, they have undertaken extensive research in order to assess the budget speech, and they will present this morning in accordance with 5 thematic areas. The areas are the legislative framework, the macroeconomic developments, the budget, implementation challenges, alignment of the budget with the National Sustainable Development Plan. As Juliet and Laurel delve into the varying aspects of the 2020 budget speech, they anticipate you will have questions and comments. We will seek to accommodate these at varying points in the presentation. I now invite Laurel and Juliet to undertake the analysis.
Thank you very much, Gemma, and good day. The budget, which is the financial plan for 2020, was presented. It began with a legislative context, including reference to the Public Finance Management Act, the Debt Management Act, the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Consistent with these legislation, a number of documents were presented to Parliament. The documents which we used extensively for this discussion were the medium-term debt management strategy and the medium-term fiscal framework. Within that legislative context, we note that there were some areas of further enhancement. The Public Debt Management Act requires that a comprehensive public sector debt report be presented at the time of the presentation of the estimates of revenue and expenditure. And this was not included in the list of documents presented during the budget speech. In addition, the Debt Management Act makes provision for the medium-term debt management strategy to be presented 2 months before the beginning of the financial year. And this requires that the report be presented at the 1st of November. So in relation to the documents presented and the legislative context, there are some areas for enhancement. We also note that no documents or mention was made of the National Transformation Fund, the fund through which the incomes from the Citizens by Investment Program is managed. Given the importance of that program in terms of fiscal policy, we thought it was appropriate to include mention of the National Transformation Fund in the budget speech and any documents to support that fund to be laid before Parliament. With this legislative framework, we entered into the budget speech, which started with the macroeconomic context. I'm being heard?
Yes, you are.
Yes, you are. Juliet.
Yes.
Oh.
Go ahead, Laurel.
I'm not hearing Laurel.
You're not hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you now. Yes.
Okay, so it is in this legislative context that we went into the macroeconomic developments.
Yes, so thank you, Laurel. Thank you, Laurel. I'm happy to be back on Fiscal Alert. Good morning, everybody. The information provided in the medium fiscal framework should be clear and complete, with simple explanation to allow ordinary people to understand how the economy is performing and how government policies are working. The public in general, public documents should seek to educate and inform with the goal of empowering people. In that context, as Laurel said, there are some areas for improvement that would allow the public to be better informed as to what is going on in the economy. With that said, let me turn to the macroeconomic context. The data shows that Grenada continues to grow at a healthy pace, projected to be around 3.2% for 2019, and this is about 1% less than was originally projected. In comparison, the ETCU currency area will grow by an estimated 4%, and the wider CARICOM region by some 8%, mainly due to the performance of Guyana. Growth of 4.2% is expected in 2020. Decline in unemployment is also being reported by the government. This stood at 15.2% for the first quarter of 2019, based on the survey of labor force. The IMF Article 4 report that was released, press release in July 2019, notes that unemployment had decreased from 23.5% to about 22%, 21.75% between 2017 and 18. It also reported that youth unemployment was high and declining, but no figure was presented. Inflation remains subdued at around 1%. So according to these key macroeconomic indicators, Grenada seems to be doing fairly well. All the targets in the fiscal responsibility legislation are being met or surpassed. Record surpluses are being achieved. Debt to GDP is declining rapidly. But as we discussed last week, macroeconomic indicators only tell part of the story. The key GDP indicators, the key GDP indicator, which we talked about, only tells us about output, whether this is increasing or decreasing. It says nothing about how people are experiencing this growth. While the reported downward trend in unemployment is good, we should probe beyond this to ascertain who is benefiting from the positive developments in the economy. It would be useful to have some more detailed labor force statistics on the types of jobs being created, the average income, youth unemployment, employment by gender, by tariff, industry, etc. I have been unable to find the latest information on the labor force from any publicly available source. The last published labor force, the last publicly available labor force data is contained in a comprehensive report prepared by the CSO and the World Bank for the period 2013 to 15. In this document, it was reported that unemployment fell from 32%, 32.2% to 29% over the period 2013 to 15. At the same time, youth unemployment fell from a high of 53% to 42%. Females were said to have a much higher rate of unemployment, and St. Mark, St. Andrew, and St. Patrick had the highest rates of unemployment. A similar comprehensive analysis of the most recent labor force data, that is for the period after 2015, should be undertaken to shed light on the unemployment situation in the country and as a guide for policy action. A number of young people join the labor force every year. Are sufficient jobs or opportunities being created to absorb these people? Additionally, the public sector has been shedding labor through attrition and through non-renewal of contracts, etc. So while some jobs have been created, some are lost, and other new labor market entrants are growing year after year. What is the next situation? I next turn to another indicator of welfare, poverty rates. The last poverty assessment, somewhat dated, 2008, revealed a significant number of working poor and many others subsisted in very vulnerable conditions in which a shock can cause them to descend into poverty. The country poverty assessment found that almost 2/3 of the population living below the poverty line were employed, and more than half of these people were working either in agriculture, fisheries, or construction. The quality of jobs that are being created thus matters. More therefore needs to be known about the types of jobs being created and the income generated from these. This 2008 CPA also found that around 37% of the population were living below the poverty line, with an estimated 2.4% being considered as indigent, that is, being unable to afford basic food to keep body and soul together.
But Juliet,
yes,
I recognize that you have indicated that the poverty assessment over 37% was taken in 2008.
Yes.
We also have to note that in 2009, the economy contracted due to the impact of the economic and financial crisis.
Yes.
And between 2009, 2010, and 2011, the economy remained relatively depressed, which may suggest that poverty rates may have increased. In addition, there are some researchers who seem to suggest that if the poverty rate is not addressed aggressively, what could happen is that during periods of high growth, the working poor categories of poverty could increase.
Yes, that is a good observation. And what I would want to say is that current information is urgently needed to assess how the population situation has evolved over time, given the fallout, as you said, from the global crisis and the austere measures being pursued, despite reported increases in growth. Very austere measures are being pursued to bring the debt down to the target level. The IMF report I referred to earlier also noted that some 500 persons were added to the SEED program in 2018. This suggests an increasing demand for social assistance. So it may be indicative of deteriorating welfare for certain people. And in this context, social protection support would be key to cushioning the effect of a fiscal stance focused on rapidly reducing the debt and within the strictures of the fiscal responsibility legislation and the extremely limited fiscal space. Therefore, an eye has to be kept on those expenditures which are most likely to be directly supporting vulnerable groups. So in sum, what we're saying, additional indicators are needed to give a fuller picture of the impact of government policies. So you need more comprehensive data on your unemployment, your poverty rates, social protection expenditure, the quality of social services. The social impact of the economic measures must be assessed and mitigated for. I now just want to say a bit about the public debt and the observation. The framework reports that, this is the medium-term fiscal framework, reports that the debt to GDP will reach 55.8% by the end of 2019. And it is projected to attain the target rate of 55% well ahead of 2030. The debt ratio, this debt ratio is below the ECCU target of 60%, but some clarification is required with respect to some outstanding debt not captured in this debt ratio. The IMF Article 4 press release of July 2019 identified other outstanding debt as the non-guaranteed debt of public enterprises, put at 3.5% of GDP, monies owed to Petrocarib, another 11.5% of GDP, and some sums that are owed to bilateral creditors at 1.6% of GDP. In total, these amount to some 16.6% of GDP, which would put the real debt to GDP ratio at over 70%. The 55.8% debt ratio that is pointed to refers strictly to central government and government guaranteed debt, and not these other debts that I mentioned, that I just mentioned. And according to the IMF press release, these outstanding claims remain to be regularized as at the time of its mission, and it impede the upgrading of Grenada's in distress rating. So clarification is required as to whether these debts are being serviced. If not, what is the plan for servicing these debts? And I don't know if anyone can tell us why these debts are not covered by the fiscal responsibility legislation. Another area in which some information can be shared with the public is with respect to the proposed use of revenues from the Citizens by Investment program to retire the restructured bond. According to the debt restructuring agreement, some of the revenues from the Citizens by Investment program has been earmarked to pay bondholders if certain conditions are met. One of these is if more than 15 million, if revenue from the CBI revenue exceeds 15 million. Additional payments are to be made to the bondholders according to a schedule specified in the agreement. And this should result in an early retirement of these bonds. Given this is an important aspect of the restructuring agreement, it should be reported on. So some clarification in the various documents that are presented should be incorporated. I think we'll turn to the budget proposal now, but we'll take maybe some questions at this stage.
So, Juliet.
Yes.
Yes. So you mentioned that there's a number of debts that's not being recorded, and in essence, the rating for Grenada is still at a distressed level.
Well, this is based on the IMF debt sustainability analysis, in that they would take into account all of the debts that the government of Grenada has to service at some point in time. So based on the inclusion of those debts, that would be the rating, still in distress.
And corrected also for these debts, the debt to GDP ratio is more at 70% as opposed to in the 50s.
If you include them, but it is not at variance with what is required in the fiscal responsibility legislation, because the legislation covers central government and government guaranteed debt. But if you include the totality of the debt, then it's 70%.
So prior to going into the budget, Juliet and Laurel, Oswald Dabo on Facebook is saying that the biggest allocation in the budget is debt repayment, 39%. I guess we will go into that when we look at the budget. However, Ryan is saying that macroeconomically, Grenada is okay and growing, but yet his people tell him in the diaspora things hard, and he must send them a barrel and Western Union US dollars. And he says this is the effects of one-term borrowing. Also, Arthur Langine is saying, thanks much for having these ladies to bring the true information to us. So we can now proceed to the budget part.
Could I ask one, Gemma, before you proceed, there was, Juliet, you made mention of the unemployment figures. Yes. And you quoted the figure of 15.2% based on the labor survey. And you also quoted an IMF figure of 21.7%. Can you just give us some?
Yes. There's a figure in the budget of 15.2%. And also, I think it's reported also in the IMF program. This figure is said to be based on a recent labor force survey undertaken, I think, in 2019. I have been unable to find any information on the most recent labor force survey. What I've been able to find publicly, that you can go online and download, is the report for 2013 to 15. So to the extent that there is more recent data that there has been labor force surveys post that report, that information needed to be made available and analyzed in a similar fashion. So you're able to get a sense of what is going on. So at the moment, the 15% is simply being reported as reported in the budget. And the figures that I quoted for the IMF is similarly based on this report that I have not seen. So the only the 2013-2015 figures are from a report that is available online that presents a comprehensive analysis of all the information collected from the labor force survey. So it's very detailed, but it's not available for any for development post 2015.
Okay.
Thank you, Juliet. So we now enter into the proposals for 2020. But before going into the proposal for 2020, I will go back a bit to developments in 2019. The government operated within the Fiscal Responsibility Act, and targets have been achieved. Juliet would have mentioned that we achieved the debt to GDP ratio of 65.8% at the end of 2019. However, there are some debt obligations that are not included in that report, and hence our debt to GDP ratio on inclusion will bring us to 70%, over 70%. In terms of the performance, I will focus on the primary balance, which we achieved of 6.8%, significantly higher than the targeted 3.5%. To explain what has happened in 2019, I want my audience to join with me as we reflect on the finances of a household, and then we will transfer this to the government finances. Think of a household earning an income of $100 per month with expenses of $90 per month. It means that the balance available to that household is $10 a month. This is the finances available based on the effort of the household in generating revenue, $10 per month. However, the household may have a daughter residing in the USA who sends $100 a month to the household. This gives income of $200 per month and increases the resources available to the household to $110 a month. If we go back now to the primary balance of 6.8% of GDP, this primary balance includes grants, which the government would receive from friendly government. The primary balance, I just want to reiterate, is the total revenue less expenditure, excluding interest payments. However, there is an indicator that gives an indication of how the economy is generating adequate domestic resources to finance its expenditure, and that's the primary balance before grants. That is, we eliminate the assistance we are getting from friendly government to determine how we are doing domestically to finance our expenditure. So there are two indicators: primary balance after grants, which we are using at 6.8%, which includes grants received from friendly governments, and primary balance before grants, which we estimate at 3.8%, which shows the amount of domestic resources have been generated to finance your expenditure. We link this to the Fiscal Responsibility Act. The Fiscal Responsibility Act states, I'm not quoting directly, that the following rules and targets are exempt from the fiscal rule: capital grants and the expenditure associated with capital grants. And therefore, we thought that capital grants should be excluded from the calculation of the primary balance. And the appropriate primary balance is the primary balance before grants of 2.8%. I must mention that in assessing the fiscal performance, the two balances could be used. However, it is also important to stress the primary balance before grants. That's 2019. I go down to the capital expenditure. The fiscal target of 6.8% primary balance was also achieved with a lower level of fiscal activity. In the 2019 budget, capital grants was estimated at 183 million for 2019. However, the actual grants spending was 98 million. There was a shortfall between the estimate and what was expended. Capital expenditure was estimated at $196 million, and the actual expenditure was 100 million. So there was a lower level of economic activity, and that could, in part, contribute to a lower level of economic activity. Let's go to 2020, the proposals for 2020. I will start with the operational aspect of the government, that is its current revenue and its current expenditure. In looking at the proposal, there were no significant proposals to affect the structure of revenue and expenditure. We note that current revenue, that is operational revenue, was expected to grow marginally by 0.5%. And this is because tax revenue is estimated to grow marginally by 0.0%. In the budget, there were no major tax enhancing measures. The marginal growth in revenue of 0.1% could be rationalized in 2 points. One, an attempt to focus revenue conservatively so that at the end of the financial year, you perform more than budgeted. And this is a good policy, fiscal policy tool, to be conservative in the estimates of revenue. However, it could also mean that your revenue, tax revenue, is not responding as economic activity expands. Economic activity is expected to grow by 4.2% in real terms. It does not take in the rate of inflation. If we include the rate of inflation, we expect our GDP to grow by about 5.2%, and hence our revenue to grow almost in line with our GDP. But as I said, conservative estimates of revenue is generally good. Non-tax revenue is projected to grow by about 6%. And this will be influenced by revenue measures not included in the budget, but that were implemented prior to the budget date. And this is your fees for passport and police records.
And the revenues from the Citizen by Investment program, it's included there.
Okay. Thank you, Juliet. Let's go to expenditure. Our current expenditure is expected to grow by 3%, and this is consistent with the Fiscal Responsibility Act. We look at the component of current expenditure, and there are some developments. The wage bill is projected to grow by 9% in 2020. Expenditure on goods and services, that is your stationery for public administration, your education services, your health services, your utilities aggregated, are expected, that category is expected to decline by 7% in 2020. Expenditure on social services, your transfers, are expected to decline by 1%. So we have a 9% increase in wage bill, 7% in goods and services, and 1% decrease in social services. We note also that interest payment is expected to increase by 11%. And we, as Juliet would have mentioned, we still need some clarity in terms of the debt dynamics, because as the debt declines, we expect interest payments to decline. And this is what is happening on the operational accounts. In terms of the capital account, we expect grants of $201 million in 2020. And this will support capital expenditure of $225 million. In relation to the capital expenditure, and if we go back to 2019, we will note that, and we calculated the implementation rate. That is the amount of capital expenditure implemented in 2019, 101 million, divided by the amount planned to be implemented, 196 million. And we got an implementation rate of approximately 52%. With that low implementation rate, it is unlikely that the capital expenditure of 225 million will be achieved. There are some implementation issues. The budget mentioned improving capacity to implement the capital programs and the budget in general. But along with the capacities, there are other issues that must be addressed in order to improve implementation capacity. One, and in most countries sometimes, there is an eagerness to put projects in the budget when they are just in the idea stage. And that causes a high capital program. Secondly, sometimes the projects are not properly conceptualized, designed, and discussions are not held with the beneficiaries. As a result, there are implementation lags. Also, with what we call the delivery chain, a project may originate in the Ministry of Health, but requires collaboration with the Ministry of Education, with their electricity suppliers, with your water suppliers, and these are not adequately taken into consideration during the project design, and they cause implementation lags.
Laurel, I can also say that another important factor in the implementation deficit is the lack of project ownership or program ownership by the country. And here what we're talking about is that the selection of a program or a project to proceed with a project is driven by the availability of the funds rather than the priorities of the country. So the donors or the development partners are providing funds for a particular type of intervention. And in order to access that fund, you have to be doing something that is consistent with that. So many countries, in order to lock in the funds, say we're going to do a project. But at the end of the day, there is really no support, no ownership of the project by the country, and it simply lags. And that's an important factor, apart from the deficiencies in project design that you mentioned. There's also an issue of the inability to raise counterpart funding to contribute towards the project. And in some cases, there are also delays in passing legislation or undertaking some preconditions that are necessary in order for projects to move forward. So because of all of these reasons, you tend to have an implementation deficit or an implementation lag. And this is characteristic not only of Grenada, but it has been a long-standing issue in Grenada, but also other countries throughout the region. And it is because of this, CDB, the Caribbean Development Bank, over the years have been providing support to countries to build their capacity to develop and implement policies and programs. And most recently, CDB financed such a program, one that sought to deliver public policy analysis and management and project cycle management training to increase the capacity of countries to close the implementation gap. And I know Grenada benefited from this training. The question therefore needs to be asked: how would these trained people being utilized, and how are they allocated? How has the training been utilized to overcome the implementation challenge? Further, to boost the countries, a trainer aspect of the program was also undertaken. This was to ensure that once the initial trainers left, that the country would still have the capacity to maintain ongoing training so that you build up your project preparation and project implementation skills, etc.
Thank you, Juliet. Thank you, Juliet, for that input. And you recall, Juliet, we looked through the budget estimates for the budget proposals for 2018, 2019, and 2020 to able to identify these implementation lags. And we saw a number of projects which were announced in 2018 and 19 and 20, and we could name a few. In public administration, we had public sector modernization in all the years. We have pension reform 2018-19 with some movements in 2020. In the education system, we had the issues of the renovations to school. We could mention two here what we identified: St. David's RC Secondary School, Bishop's College in Carriacou. In terms of agriculture, we saw the rural development in terms of lands for young men and women. We saw it in 2018, again in 2020. In health, we have the ongoing National Health Plan in those years. In infrastructure, we know that there were a number of roads in most of the years, 18, 19, and 20. And also, important also, is the Maurice Bishop International Airport, which we saw in all years. There were areas of progress, particularly in the housing program, where we see in 2018, 19, and 20, there were progress in terms of going forward to the implementation of the housing project. And there was some movement on the national health insurance. But these were some of the implementation lags we saw, which we needed to highlight it as we go forward in implementing the 2020 budget.
Thank you, Laurel and Juliet, for addressing the implementation challenges. Ryan on Facebook is saying...
You're not hearing Gemma?
Yes, I'm hearing.
Okay.
Ryan on Facebook is... Yes, we are hearing you. Ryan is saying that it is argued that public debt is a safe way for foreigners to invest in a country's growth by buying government bonds which boost economic growth. Any comments, please?
Actually, he was asking a question before that. He said here, ladies, is it good for a country to have public debt? Juliet?
Well, I think public debt, just like household debt or individual debt or business debt, is neither good or bad. I think it's the use you put it to. If you are contracting debt, the debt has to be repaid. And one would assume that the debt that you are contracting would go towards activities that would either mitigate the need for future borrowing or would generate income that you can afford to pay off the debt. So debt in and of itself is neither good or bad. It's too much debt where you exceed the capacity of the country to sustainably service that debt is the issue. And all countries at some point in time need to contract debt to meet their ongoing government activities. So it's neither good or bad. Debt in and of itself, it's neutral.
All right, gentlemen, you want to try that next one there, Prince Moses? All right, I'll go with it.
He's also speaking about the public debt also. So I think in the interest of time, we will go on to the alignment of the budget with the National Sustainable Development Plan. Okay. And we'll take in Prince's comment after.
No, but Gemma, going back to the question, the point I'm making is whether it's the debt for a domestic household or debt at the country level, debt by itself is not bad. It's the
Yes,
youth.
we accept that.
Right?
Yeah, we have accepted that, yes.
Yes,
So we're
so
moving on to the fifth
we have
thematic
lost,
area.
Have we lost Laurel?
Seems that way. But go ahead, Gemma, go ahead. Juliet, you want to move on to point 5?
Yes. The completion of the National Sustainable Development Plan is very welcome, as it sets the priorities for the country to 2035. The plan identifies 3 national goals and 8 national outcomes for the period 2020 to 2035. According to the medium-term fiscal framework, that is covering 2020 to 2022, the plan is intended to guide the priorities and the work program of all the ministries and set the strategic direction for the 2020 budget and all subsequent budget to 2035. This recognizes that policy has to be more than simply debt reduction as the primary policy objective for the medium term. And this is a major shift. The 2020 budget is built around the following themes: empowering our communities, growing our economy, protecting our environment, strengthening our institutions. Despite the new themes, the core programs have not changed. And given the fiscal constraints, there are only a few notable new programs. Outside of the major capital projects, the budget primarily supports ongoing established programs, albeit with a reduced allocation of resources, which has the potential to adversely affect beneficiaries or recipients if not accompanied by robust measures to improve their efficiency and effectiveness. A number of the established programs, as I said, they are still being supported. So for example, you still have your Empower for Males, the new Imani project. You have the range of targeted assistance still being funded, needy assistance, 3.1 million reduced to 2.2 million, burial assistance, support for education, empowerment and development, uniform allocation, etc., etc. So these programs are still being supported, the roving care, burial assistance. The issue here is, or not an issue, but a concern is given the reduced allocation that you do not compromise quality. Hello, Laurel, you're back with us?
Yes, Laura's back with us. Just go ahead.
She's back with us. That's good. So what you have is a range of social protection type support that are being funded. And in a fiscally constrained environment, some stock taking seems necessary to ensure that the limited resources are being used effectively and they are achieving their intended aims and objectives. So one of the critical things that needs to happen, I think, is some sort of project and program evaluation to determine the effectiveness of these projects and programs. And this must be done on an ongoing basis. It has to be more than counting and saying how many people access the program. We need to ensure that the right people are accessing the services meant for them and that the programs are making a real difference to their lives. So then beneficiary targeting based on needs and program evaluation are important. The goal of these social assistance type of program, while they provided immediate help, they should always also be about empowerment through targeted assistance, and ultimately the aim should be to graduate people from the program. You also need some stock taking given the range of programs, and I think this was something that was identified in a social protection study undertaken for Grenada that there are a number of overlaps between programs and that there may be issues of double dipping where people are benefiting from more than one program over and above what is intended. So you need to do some stock taking to streamline the programs to make sure that they are benefiting, persons are not benefiting from more than one program, and that you do not have more than one program targeting the same sort of assistance. In terms of the new areas that one may want to look at, under the theme of community empowerment, one of the new initiatives is the proposed leadership training and professional development for principals, vice principals, etc. The introduction of a pilot ebook scheme in schools, and some other things. One aspect, so this strengthening of the education system is good news for all. Specifically, these measures that support strengthening leadership. But the measures that are being proposed do not as yet treat to the vision of education identified in the National Sustainable Development Plan, which is a reorientation away from a strongly academic focus to a textbook focus, curriculum reform, improving the efficiency and the effectiveness of the education, the high numbers of children leaving school without any kind of certification, etc. And one may wish to look to address these first and look at the readiness to switch to an ebook platform and other types of changes without addressing some of the fundamental issues plaguing education, and also some of the more recent emergent issues surrounding the use of technology in schools. The budget also focuses on youth advancement in its Empower program, and its Imani program. And my reading of this is that there are some issues with both programs that need to be addressed. Looking at the Empower and looking at the budget in general, one of the things that came to mind, I asked, what about young women? A number of the interventions that the budget mentioned to support women, girls, and children treat them as victims, to protect them as victims, which is highly desirable. So you have the special victims unit, your hotline, your sex offenders registration, home for girls. But I asked, where are the interventions to empower women, to foster their economic independence, given the central role they play in Grenadian households, in many cases as the main breadwinners? In terms of the Imani project, this was intended to provide on-the-job training opportunities for young people to give them if you want to say, the entree into the world of work. This has morphed into a type of a temporary job placement program, and many have expressed dissatisfaction with this. It is heartening to note that the government has indicated that it intends to review this to make it more meaningful and relevant. Young people are calling for training to equip them with skills and knowledge that will enable them to be productive workers. And the IBANI program is not delivering on this at the moment. So one hopes that this proposed revamping would take place. I already spoke about the need for the range of social protection programs that are in place and that they need to be evaluated urgently. This is especially given the tight fiscal situation. In terms of strengthening our institution, they speak about an expenditure review, which is critical. Nobody can argue with that. Again, the situation dictates it. But in general, and I'm not going to go into the other sectors, My reading of, oh no, before I talk about that, let me just say a bit about the infrastructure projects. The budget identifies some 19 major capital projects for 2020. If all of these projects get started, or even 75%, they will generate significant activity in Grenada. But Laurel has already pointed to the implementation deficit, which characterizes Grenada's capital expenditure program. We have heard the record for implementing capital projects is not good. It's not that good. The government recognizes this, and it has indicated it has taken steps to address the implementation deficit. And it's reported that it has already hired people to supplement the Ministry of Infrastructural Development, Implementation and Works, and it plans to do new hires in 2020. It has also allocated $3 million of grant resources to contract more engineers, planners, and program managers. And finally, a private entity would be engaged to provide the necessary project management support. Closing the implementation gap is an immediate priority, as failure to get projects started adversely affects access to grant resources. More than 75 or even higher percent of Grenada's capital budget is funded from grant resources. If the projects and them do not get going, the grants do not materialize. And this is important. My question that I would want some feedback on is what has happened to the people that have been trained? Have any difference been noticed in design? Are you getting better design projects? Any increase in implementation of projects? What has happened to these many senior public servants and technical officials that have been trained under the program? How are they utilized? In general, I find for engaging the public and securing public support for the National Sustainable Development Plan, the themes in the budget should more closely mirror the themes in the medium-term fiscal framework, which mirrors the Sustainable Development Plan at the higher level. The budget measures in the 2020 budget are in the main a continuation of the focus of the 2019 budget. A large number of the measures, they are not transformational in the way envisioned in the SDP. And maybe it's too early to expect it to be so. But the measures are really incremental and of the maintenance type, maintaining programs and projects that have been in place, routine, ongoing operation. And the proposed sector intervention need to be more closely aligned with the sustainable development priorities. It should indicate what aspect of the plan is being implemented by the given budget for the given year.
Juliet and team, I have been disrupted by internet problems, and so I'm just joining again.
Yes, welcome back, Laurel.
Thank you.
Yes, any comments, Laurel, on the alignment of the budget?
I didn't hear what went on before, but what I can say here is that when we look, two comments I have to make here. First of all, Grenada operates within some integration movements, CARICOM and OECS. And I did not see where there was leverage of these arrangements to increase capacity and productive activities. And I think that is an area that needed to be enhanced. Also, in terms of the productive sectors, also I need to mention, particularly agriculture, tourism, and tourism in the first instance. In the vision for the agricultural sector, arrangement is being made for increasing production, moving into higher value added and agro-processing, and linking with the manufacturing and tourism sectors. In the budget, arrangements are being made for increases in production, and it is good that a risk insurance is being implemented.
Yes.
However, this link between agriculture, agro-processing, which requires research, targeted intervention in the agriculture sector. I was not seeing that in the budget. In tourism, there is the Trust for Health and Wellness Tourism. Although there is expansion in hotel plan, that link again is not there. I must mention here, one of the key sectors that will transform our economy is the oil and gas sector. Mention is made in the National Sustainable Development Plan, where we need to develop governance structures, institutional arrangements, and the sovereign wealth fund. However, no mention is made of it in the national budget. So I agree that there is need for this alignment between the budget and the National Sustainable Development Plan. It is hoped that with the development of a medium-term strategy, which we were not able to locate, the budget will be aligned to the medium-term strategy, which gives details on policies, strategies, projects, and capital expenditures, that is the financing of the plan, and then with the medium-term sustainable plan. But I agree with Juliet that the projects are a continuation of previous projects, and there need to be a more focused attention to transforming the economy. Am I there?
Janet, we're not hearing. Janice, we're not hearing you.
Janice, you have to unmute. You're muted.
Okay,
Sorry.
there you go.
In addition, we have mention of the national health insurance. And what we can say here is that the rationale for a national health insurance is documented. It has to do with poverty, inequality, goods and services. But what is really important about implementing national insurance is the cost. And it is important for us to be transparent as to the cost and how the national insurance will be financed. Now, we cannot, to have a sustainable health system, we cannot finance national insurance on grants. It's not sustainable. In addition, it is not recommended that we use loans to finance a national insurance. Your financing will have to be largely domestic-based. And we also have to take into consideration that the national insurance will be a recurring expenditure. And as the years go by, that expenditure will increase because you have increase in the aging population, and you'll also have, because you have increase in the aging population, you also have increase in the management of chronic illnesses. So you have to have some reliable source of financing national health insurance. In most countries that have a national health insurance, the form that is used is taxation. For example, in Europe, in the UK, in Cuba, they use taxation in order to finance the national health insurance. In some other countries, they use payroll deduction. Like, for example, in Singapore, they use payroll deduction. But the bottom line is that in order to implement a national insurance plan, we will have to pay taxes in order to implement that plan.
Did the budget say anything about how the national health insurance will be funded?
No.
No,
Go ahead, Laura.
No, it did not. And I just mentioned that in terms of the medium-term fiscal framework, which takes us to 2020 to 2022, it did not mention, it did not give indication of how the national health insurance will be funded. It says that revenue will be gained by efficiencies in collecting revenue. On the expenditure side, the medium-term fiscal framework indicated that the national health insurance was not taken in estimated the expenditure. Maybe in that framework, we need clarity or a footnote as to how the national health insurance is expected to be treated in the medium term. And as I'm on the medium-term fiscal framework, I just want to mention that based on the Fiscal Responsibility Act, the debt to GDP ratio is supposed to be recalibrated when it reaches 55%. And the medium-term fiscal framework needs to also be modified to take into account that debt to GDP ratio needs to be recalibrated in terms of the primary balance to sustain that debt when it reaches 55%, just to mention.
So, Laurel, in the budget, in the projection for 2023, I believe the debt to GDP ratio is projected to be much lower than the 55% as required in the fiscal responsibility legislation. Is there any real benefit to target such a lower debt to GDP ratio?
It means
Laurel or Juliet?
It means it has implications for your allocation of resources. It means, and what you could do, your constraints. It means that your development program, you're allocating resources to repay debt, when maybe you could go at a slower rate in the reduction. And resources available for development purposes may be constrained. But as I said, the Fiscal Responsibility Act makes provision for when the rate reaches 55%, you recalibrate the primary balance and to sustain it at that level. I don't know if Juliet wants to add anything to that.
Not really, you are correct. But I think also to note that the IMF has also pointed to the need to balance this fiscal prudence with much needed increases in public spending in the context of already low public capital spending. So what this means is, yes, whilst you have to keep your eyes on managing your debt so that you do not accumulate these excessive levels of debt in the future, resources must be diverted to go in towards public spending, public capital spending. At the moment, more than, I would say, 90% of government capital spending is supported by grants. If the grants are not available, there would be little or no capital spending. And the non-grant financing for capital expenditure has been decreasing since 2014. So some rebalancing needs to take place. And the capital spending is key to getting the economy growing, to getting your productive sectors going. So,
and if we look at the fiscal medium-term fiscal framework, we do see a decline in grants between 2020 and 2022, from a 201 million in 2020 to about 145 million in 2022. And capital expenditure is also estimated to decline.
Yeah, so fiscal space has to be created to undertake own finance capital investment. Is either that or the foreign direct investments have to flow.
Another question is, in terms of the most vulnerable in the population, have you seen anything in the budget that will positively impact any new
as I said, no, there are no new proposals. You have your existing proposals. And what is notable is that these projects or programs, most of them have had to suffer some cut in resources. So that means to the extent if there is increasing demand on these resources, it can adversely impact beneficiaries. What can be delivered? You have had some cuts in all of them, in most. I think there's only one that was not cut.
Are there any other Facebook questions? Oh.
There are a few comments on Facebook. Amanda Jack is asking, what would be a credible reason for the lack of figures in the budget?
We would not know a credible reason. What we did say when we were doing our analysis is that the citizens, in order to empower the citizens, more information need to be presented in a manner which is easily understood. In that regard, we said that the medium-term fiscal framework needs to be more comprehensive, taking into consideration an assessment of what happened in 2019. We also note that the Development Sustainable Plan, which has very good ideas, but need to be more citizen-friendly so that it becomes a people document. So what we're encouraging is that the information be presented in such a way that the citizens could understand and it does not require such deep digging.
Yes, but the Laurel, in addition, completeness of information. That is important. It's not only presenting the data in a simple, understandable format, but the complete set of information should be presented to enable anyone looking at it to appreciate what is going on. One of the things I note in the 2020 fiscal framework, the GDP value and the growth rate for 2019 are missing. And the format of the presentation for 2020 differs somewhat from what was presented the year before. So you cannot compare. You do not have all the information to do your analysis. So ideally, the medium-term fiscal framework and all the documents should have all the information, all your key indicators, your GDP, your growth rate, as you said before, your primary balance with grant, your primary balance without grant, as well as it should include a comparative analysis of not only the outturn for the year relative to projection for that year, but also comparing performance for the previous year so that you could have some meaningful basis for analysis of performance. So I think the key word or the key approach should be transparency. You want information presented so that you don't have to dig too much. It shouldn't be too much heavy lifting to ascertain what is going on.
You know, Juliet, I'm glad you touched on that point. The word you've mentioned more than once in today's presentation is transparency. And it's so ironic that yesterday morning we did almost a 2-hour discussion on the budget. And something that kept on coming up was the absence of information. And I'm hearing you ladies harp on the same thing again this morning. So there's clearly a shortfall in the delivery of information. I've made 4 notes here, and the first one started just after your presentation began this morning, Juliet. You were talking about Grenada's growth. And I got the feeling that you were suggesting that, yes, the country is growing, but we're not doing as well as the rest of the region. And I think the reason why that may have jumped out at people is because we're often led to believe that we have the fastest economic growth in the Caribbean. So thank you for clarifying that. There's also something that was mentioned by Janice a little while ago. She was calling for transparency in the financing of the National Health Insurance Scheme. And I think a lot of people would have expected to have heard more in this past week's presentation of the budget. Very limited information came out, and it shouldn't be too surprising because just, I think last week or the week before, we had some organization come here. I don't remember the name of the organization. I think it starts with J. They came here to consult on the National Health Insurance Scheme when I think many people in this country were expecting that probably by the end of this year or at least early next year, this health insurance would have been in effect. But obviously, if we're just getting into consultations, that's not going to be the case. Again, that's disappointing. I could use other words, but let's just say disappointing. Juliet, you talked about the absence of information, absence of data. I found it so ironic listening to you repeat that here this morning after hearing, I had another economist you may know, Lennox Andrew. He was on the program yesterday. I had William Joseph. I had civil society. And they were all saying the same thing. There is a lot of information that just was not presented. And I think somebody here this morning was asking, if I'm not mistaken, Amanda Jack, you know, she's asking, how do you explain the absence of data or information? And finally, this one goes to you, Laurel. You pointed to the fact that oil and gas was not mentioned, and this too was a big part of yesterday's discussion. We have been led to believe that this country's economy is about to be changed primarily because of the advent of oil and gas. And yet you presented a budget with no mention, not one mention made to the status of things or the potential for economic change, et cetera, et cetera. And Juliet, you keep pointing to the fact that the people need to be made to understand the impact that these budgets are going to have on them. Well, that was not forthcoming. In all fairness, I will say that following the budget presentation, the Prime Minister was interviewed, and in what I described on the program yesterday as being a very uncomfortable demeanor, he just seemed to be searching for words to respond to the request for information about oil and gas. He suggested that, in a nutshell, they have not been able to find the investment that they need to pursue this to the extent that they would like to. And he was sort of blaming that on the fact that investors are now, at least this is the impression that I got, investors are now focusing elsewhere, for example, in Guyana, where they have this massive oil find. And therefore, what Grenada has to offer may not be just as appealing, you know. But he was very, very guarded in his response to that question. So still, I'm not sure exactly where we stand. Ladies, we have gone way past our time, but it was all worth it. I have immensely enjoyed sitting here and listening to you ladies this morning. Any parting words? Hello?
Yes, Laurel, take it away. Oh, in parting words, thank you, George. Yes, in parting words, we know one of the pillars of the development plan, the budget, is empowering the community, of empowering our people. And we know the importance of knowledge in understanding the fiscal developments, using all the variables required, and the impact of such fiscal policy. So we encourage the publication of comprehensive, timely data to empower our community, because we know that knowledge is power and experience is the greatest teacher. Thank you for listening and join us next Monday.
Laurel, don't go,
Yes,
don't
sir.
go. Hold on, don't go. Laurel, don't go. I couldn't help, but take a moment here. You're talking about empowering our people. It is so important that there be a change in mindset on the part of the administrative authorities to make sure that people understand what the heck they're doing. Sometimes information is presented in a way you can't help but wonder if they deliberately did it that way to make sure that you damn well don't understand what they're talking about. I know that's harsh.
Yes,
I know
George.
that's harsh, but that's the way it comes.
Yes, George.
It's true.
Yes, George. And that's why we're saying provide the knowledge the information, in a way that is comprehensive and is be able to understand.
Yes.
And that is why we say empowerment in that regard. Information, accurate information. It has to be comprehensive.
And
it has to be timely. And in a manner that it could be understood, even if it means preparing a separate document for the citizens, along with your technical document, but it has to be understood. And that is a gap we are seeing. So we had to dig to bring the information together.
Well, let me say it's a gap that you ladies are filling. I don't know whether you know it or not, but the reaction that I have been getting from people out there is that you're talking a language them could understand. And that's the bottom line. And this also gives me an opportunity to mention something that you undertook even before starting this series. I understand that you published a book. What was the name of that book, the recent book you did?
I have two books, Fiscal Policy, the Economy, a number of research papers, and the tax structure in the member countries of the ECCB. And the Fiscal Policy, the Economy takes in a number of articles. It talks about fiscal transparency, issues relating to taxation, the personal income tax, the value-added tax. So that is the book that I have published.
How are they available?
We are in the process of getting copies to be placed on Amazon, and so I will circulate the information once it is made available. We are in the process of doing that.
Let us be the first to know this.
I was off for a while, so I'm back again, so we'll do that.
Let us know, okay?
We'll do that, George.
And here is a comment that I couldn't think of a better comment to wrap up the program this morning. This comes to us from somebody who's listening to you in New York, a regular on this program. She says, thanks, ladies. Possibly the best dissection of the budget I have heard to date. Great job. And let me tell you, when you get that from Margaret, you better consider that a feather in your cap. You hear me?
Thank you very much, Margaret. We tried, our best to get all the information together.
Well, you're doing a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep it up.
Thank you, George. Thank you, audience.
Okay, we'll see you again.
See you next week.
Bye.
I wish upon a star, for a bank is better by far. Whatever you're wishing for this Christmas, we'll give you low interest and no fuss.
Co-op Bank is making Christmas wishes come true. Fix up your home, treat your loved ones, and get everything on your Christmas list this year with our no-fuss loans. As we count down the 12 days to Christmas, you can win awesome prizes every day. Special terms and conditions apply.
Christmas wishes come true with Co-op Bank and you.
Welcome home.
Alec, we're starting work on the house soon, and I'll need your help.
Sure. What do you need?
I got a service application checklist from Grenlec's website.
This looks easy.
It is. We need a new service.
That's option A.
So wherever there's an A, that's something we must do in order to get the service.
So the other things without an A don't apply?
Exactly. The checklist shows us what documents to bring, the fees, and how soon we'll get the service.
So that you realize for all services, we must complete the right application form, have a valid photo ID, and a certificate from the electrical inspector?
That's right. The electrician will help us apply to the ministry for a certificate of inspection. So we'll use the checklist to get everything we need before going to Grenada. This will make the process smooth and save lots of time.
Okay, might as well get started.
Grenlec, energizing our Grenada.
Juve chocolates, cocoa nibs, and cocoa balls from Diamond Estate Grenada are now available at Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, Amazon.co.uk, and GrenadaMarket.com. Try their sensational touch of nutmeg and a touch of ginger chocolates, 75% dark and rich, 100% pure cocoa, and their 60% dark and sweet chocolate bars today. Amazon Prime members enjoy free shipping on these orders in the USA, Canada, and Europe. GrenadaMarket.com. When you can't come to the island, the products of the island will come to you.
Parting word, my dear friends, from the Holy Scriptures. It's 11:02. It's the longest Good Day Grenada we have ever done, or worth it. Acts chapter 26, verses 15 to 19. Then I asked, "Who are you, Lord?" "I am Jesus, whom you're persecuting," the Lord replied. "Now get up and stand on your feet. I have appeared to you to appoint you as a servant and as a witness of what you have seen and will see of me. I will rescue you from your own people and from the Gentiles. I am sending you to them to open their eyes and turn them from wickedness to light, and from the power of Satan to God, so that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified by faith in me." Acts chapter 26, 15 to 19. Out of the corner of my eye, I see a couple of notes been put here. Margaret Francis says, "Agreed. Economics and math and numbers are not my things, and my brain tends to go into hibernation." And I actually stayed tuned into their presentation. Mags, you and me, 1 and 1 is 2. That's the extent of it for me. I ain't no financial whiz, so I'm like you. But these people speak a language that others understand, you and me understand. Sitting here looking at the numbers, I couldn't believe the numbers remained steady this morning. People didn't take off. No, they listened because they captivated them. I might even run this segment again on Sunday. We'll see. Ryan says, "Thanks for the great program and blessings." And Andrea St. B agrees with Margaret. Okay, friends, that's going to do it. Thank you so much. I do hope that you have a wonderful day, whatever you do. May the good Lord bless and keep you. May your heart be at peace. Just knowing that He's with you, even when He sometimes seems so distant, so far away, so invisible. He is there. Be blessed.